Okay. I respect that.
And maybe it could be like, could have whiskers on it.
Whiskers on it?
Whisker
and the
chocolate.
CGI for Nickelodeon's probably a little bit low budget.
Well, it's not necessarily lower budget, it's just a different style.
True.
But also probably a lower budget.
Probably also lower budget.
Like, it's still high budget, it's just, like, when you're dealing with all the realistic CGI, like, I think on average those movies cost like $250 million, which is insane.
Yeah, I think Aquaman was like, I want to say the budget for that was like $200 million.
Yeah.
For that. Which isn't, like, I mean, if you think about it, it's not too bad, because, like, look at Avengers Infinity War. That was like $500 million for that, or Endgame was like $500 million for the budget. I mean, it made $2 billion or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's still, like, it's pretty nuts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
And I think with Nickelodeon, it's more of having a whole bunch of deadlines instead of one really, really big deadline. It's just keep making more content versus having one really huge content where everything looks super real. It's kind of more...
You got to stretch it across a lot of different...
Yeah.
I mean, most things on, like, places like that is just TV shows. They don't really make movies. I mean, I guess they do. I don't really watch Nickelodeon anymore.
Mm-hmm. I haven't... Do you know any Nickelodeon TV shows that are out right now?
I don't.
Because I don't think I do either. Like Adventure Time, but I don't even know if they're doing that anymore.
Is Adventure Time Nickelodeon?
Nope, Cartoon Network.
I'll say it was Cartoon Network. I'll say, because I know that one, but that one's Cartoon Network. I mean, I can't honestly say that I do, because my little sister is 13, so she doesn't watch Nickelodeon anymore, and then my other sister, she's gonna be 19, so I don't really have... I have little cousins, but I don't really spend time around them when they're watching TV, so I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what goes on those TV shows anymore.
That's what happens when adult life hits you.
Exactly.
Hits you hard.
Like Disney Channel, I did watch Girl Meets World on Disney Channel because I was a Boy Meets World fan.
I don't know what that is.
You have no idea what I'm talking about. Oh, God, you're hurting me so bad. Daniel, Boy Meets World is the best TV show ever. It's on Hulu. Watch it. It's the best TV show. It's the best adolescent TV show, I should say.
Okay. Well, so I still need to get caught up on regular show. And I didn't realize how many seasons of regular show there are. There's like 20.
Of what?
Regular show?
What's regular show?
Oh my gosh! What?
I thought you meant my regular shows, like the shows that you regularly watch.
It's on Cartoon Network. It was like there's Adventure Time, there's regular show. They're kind of similar, but regular show I felt was kind of more, not necessarily darker humor, but it had like more adult focused humor, I think.
Remember that Cartoon Network TV show that was like about the imaginary friends?
Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends.
Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends?
Yeah.
That was actually kind of fucked up, if you think about it. It was really creepy, actually.
Let me tell you about that. So, one of my friends I did drum corps with, he said that, was it Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network?
That was Cartoon Network.
Cartoon Network. So he said that some of the makers of Cartoon Network came into his school just to be like, be like, hey, this is what we do, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's because, like, they do that. And so, they asked the students, like, hey, you have any ideas? And he said, yeah, I have this idea where there's this ghost, and so there's this kid, and he has an imaginary, like, ghost friend. And he basically described Foster's Home for Imaginary Friend, and they turned it into Foster's Home. So they
just ripped the deal off an idea
like
of a
little
kid.
student. Yeah.
And he's probably like sitting there like later on, he's like, what the heck? What the hell? He just ripped my idea off. He's like, where's my compensation? I want my royalty checks.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah,
I mean, that's funny though. I mean, you go in, I mean, think about it though. Like, you know how many ideas that are out there that are probably just like, you don't even know, like, think about, like, I mean, when I create stuff, when I write stuff, I always randomly will just get, like, ideas, even if it's something that somebody, like, said or did, or sometimes you're just like, oh, wow, and then you go off of it, like, you have no idea where people are getting these, like, like, the original ideas from. Yeah. You're like, okay, I wonder, like, what was going through this person's head. Like, when they said, like, oh, like, I want to do this, or, like, James Cameron when he made Avatar or whatever. Like, what was going through his head? What made him realize, oh, I want to create this? Or, like, people who wrote, like, even, like, I've read a lot of stuff, like, on J.K. Rowling, who created Harry Potter. And she was just, like, she just was lucky enough to remember a lot of her imagination from as a kid and use that into what it is now, and then just started creating things, like, just going around, like London or whatever, England. She just started getting ideas for these things, and like they were just like coming to her. She was like, I just get an idea after idea after idea. She's like, I got this idea, like, she's like, I was watching like a soccer game, and then I just imagined, oh, what if these guys were on broomsticks flying around when she was creating Harry Potter, and that's how she created Quidditch. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, it's like random things like where like people get these ideas from. Like, it's awesome. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I forgot who quoted this, but I want to say it was Steve Jobs. But the quote is, creativity is simply putting two things that already I think it's like putting two things that already exist together. Just like putting things together is creativity.
Yeah.
And so it's, and like another quote which kind of puts a different perspective on it is like, creativity is being good at stealing things but making it your own.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was in one of my writing classes at UT, my teacher said, I mean, there was a quote by somebody. It was I can't remember who the quote was by. I'd have to look in my notebook, but it was, good writers borrow, but great writers steal.
Yeah.
You know, and that's basically like, I mean, and it sounds bad, because it sounds like, okay, you're just ripping off ideas from other people, but really it's just, you're taking something that already exists, something that's already out there, and then you're twisting it into some version of it, because there's original ideas, but that idea came from something.
Yeah.
Something that was there. You didn't just go, okay, someone didn't just go, you know what? Magic. And it was just, it was just in their head, and they're like, magic, well, you could just do anything.
Yeah.
No, it didn't just happen. It was just from, like, I mean, I'm guessing, you know, there's deep things, you know, like, it comes from religion. Like, even Harry Potter, almost every single thing that she wrote in that came from mythology, came from folklore, came from something.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not saying even back in the day you had people like, you know, Socrates or Homer. I was almost at Halo, but Homer, who were like creating these mythological stories, but it's still coming from, you know, their gods and their religion and whatever they had at the time. So it's like everything's really coming from some type of source, and it's just you're making it original by whatever spin you put on it. Like, I saw this thing the other day. It was like most of the time, it was like the plot of your story, if you really think about it, it's not going to be original. You're not going to come up with something that's never been done before. But what makes your story or your plot or whatever set apart from like other people's, like, okay, you made a story about witches and wizards. What makes this different from a Harry Potter? What makes this different than any other story that has this type of stuff? Yeah. And it's like, it was like the characters, the dialogue, everything else you put into the story, and the plot itself, you know, like, you can take a concept, a plot that maybe is in some other, like literally Star Wars.
Or like Atlantis.
Exactly, like Atlantis, and you can make it into a twisted horror story, you know, like whatever it is, and you can make it into this crazy thing. It's just how you spin it into your own sort of thing, and it just has to have your own sort of touch on it, so,
yeah.
You know, yeah.
So, aren't you like writing a really big book at the moment, or no? Yeah, we have like random Febreze thing that goes off.
Okay, that's shit out of me. Yes, I am. I am currently writing a novel right now.
And so, do you ever have moments where, like, you just have creative brain farts where you just can't think of anything?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so, one of the things that I've heard, the way that you can overcome that is, one, just getting out more, like, living life and just exploring, going on hikes, etc., etc. And I think another thing that we've just realized that you can do is you can also go to elementary schools and ask kids for ideas. Because if you think about it,
exactly.
Kids' minds are all over the place, and I think if you're desperate enough, that's a veteran move.
Yeah. Well, you know, traveling definitely does come into, I mean, I've gotten a lot of my best ideas from traveling, and I mean, Stephen King said, you know, to be a great writer, you have to be a great reader. Like, you're not going to be a writer if you don't read. Like, and that's just kind of simple. It's like, okay, I'm going to make a movie, but you've never watched a movie before. It's like, I have no idea what to even do.
Right.
So, like, traveling and really getting out there, I mean, whenever I get into my brain farts, if I'm getting into a brain fart while I'm writing and while I'm kind of into it and I'm at home and, like, it's wintertime or there's not really anything I can do outside, I usually just play, like, Nerf basketball. Like, that's something that I do. Like, I have a little basketball hoop in my living room, and you just kind of shoot, and I talk to myself a lot, like, when I write. It sounds kind of crazy, but I kind of talk out loud and I get ideas out there. Like, just the other day I had, like, I knew how I wanted to start my story, I thought, and then it changed to something else that I thought was a way better way to start it. And then some random, like, I was like going through a notebook that I had written down because I have like 3 notebooks and a bunch of different like loose leaf piece of paper that I like, if I get an idea, like I carry a notebook on me at all times and I write it down or I jot it down on a piece of paper and then I'll put it on my laptop so I don't ever lose it. But I happened to find an old notebook when I was going to Cedar Point, and I took it with me and I started reading through it, and I got like 4 or 5 ideas that I'd come up with that I had kind of written down for a previous story, but that story had changed, but the concept still made sense and they were really good. So then I was just like, oh wow. So then literally I was like, okay, never mind, I want to start it this way. So then I was going back and forth on how to do it, and then but literally I was like racking my brain. It was horrible. I was like, I know I can see it in my head, but I don't know where to go from here. So it's just like, sometimes it's just going out and, you know, like it's just chilling, watching a movie, you know, like letting your brain relax for a little bit. It's just kind of going and reading a book that maybe you're reading at the time, playing Nerf basketball. Sometimes I go for a walk, like just like around campus, like at night, or, you know, anything like that. Just go to Wildwood or anything like that, just to kind of get outside and then just kind of look around and then just kind of be alone with your thoughts, listen to music and just kind of think about it and stuff like that. Just kind of, because everybody's going to hit a creative stagnant at one point. You know, you're not going to just be like, you know what, I'm pumping out great idea after great idea. Like, you're going to write stuff and you're going to be like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen and I don't know why I thought of it. But at the time, you're like, oh, this was great, this was fantastic. But as you write, you know, you write yourself into this way, and you might write yourself and be like, oh, this character is going to be this. Like, you started out, you're like, my character is going to be this shy, introverted person who kind of breaks out of his shell. But then as you're writing, you're like, no, like my character, like, I mean, it's kind of like living with multiple personality disorder, which is also kind of weird. Like, you're living with all these different characters in your own body, and then you're like, you're almost like pouring them out of yourself.
I feel it. Onto
a paper, you know, like you're like, okay, I have like, you know, this person in my head who's a jock, who's like a high school star football player, but I also have this other character who's shy but funny and witty and all these things. And you kind of like, when you start writing, you know, all these characters start to like just form, and then they start to, you know, do their own thing, and then realistically your characters are making decisions for themselves, and they're almost like they're real people, like, and that's the best way to write, because when you start writing characters as just characters, as things inside of a fiction story, then they become two-dimensional, they become very flat, and then people can tell, okay, this is just a stick figure, you know, that, you know, but you want to draw a doodly bob, SpongeBob, that comes to life, you know, from the page. And so that's what a lot of people try to do. You have to give them real characteristics, you have to give them personalities, and that's, I think the toughest thing, because you can come up with a really good plot, a really good setting, and you can come up with really good dialogue, just random quotes and stuff, but unless you have characters that live out the story, that live out the plot, and they're boring or stuff like that. Like, I've read a book where I love technically the plot of it, but the characters are so annoying and are so unbearable that I'm like, I can't even like watch. I can't watch it, or I can't read this book like right now, because what was it, like Stranger Things as an example. Like, I loved the concept of Stranger Things and it was really cool, but when I first watched it, I could not stand any of the characters. You know, like I couldn't stand like the chick with the psychic powers 11, like I couldn't stand her, and a lot of the kids, besides like 1 or 2 of them, like, were really annoying, and I'm like, I could barely watch this, like the characters are unbearable. But I watched it and the plot was so good that I ended up getting over the characters. They ended up getting better as time went on. But there's just been a lot of things where I'm like, it's just too hard to read, and I really wish, because this concept and this plot is like super cool, you know, but the story is just awful and I can't get past page 5.
Wait, so were you saying, was it because the characters were unbearable, just because
I don't know
was
what
it, like they were 2D, like it was kind of very cliche, or
I mean, not even that. I just kind of found them annoying. And it's not even because they weren't real. They were real kids. Like, they acted like kids, and they did a really good job of bringing them to life. But it was more or less just, I don't know, like, everybody kind of has their sense of, like, who they want their protagonist to be. Like, when you read a story, or when you write a story or whatever, like, you're like, okay, I want to read a really witty, sarcastic, humorous kind of character. And I love watching movies, and I love like reading books where like a character is like super witty and sarcastic and funny, and I can laugh out loud when I'm reading and watching it. Like Ryan Reynolds is like my favorite actor, and like anything like that, and like his personality wise is like perfect. Like, I love, like, that's the type of like characters that I like seeing, and I kind of like watching and reading about and stuff. And I don't mind like the introverted sort of like thing, but I was never able to get into stories where the main character was kind of super introverted and kind of shy, that typical kind of, I don't know, like pushed aside, like high schooler who angsty type of character.
Gotcha.
So I was kind of like, this is just kind of boring. I was never really able to get into that. So the stuff I always read was different. So for me, like the characters, like and stuff like that, have to kind of fit in with what I like reading about. And as the Stranger Things TV show went on, it started to get more humorous and it started to get better. So it was a little bit better, but it's something similar to that where like, you know, you could read, like I love, you know, robot futuristic, you know, stories where the robots come to life, but if you read it and the main character doesn't really fit in with what you like to read, or it's not even really a character that you can get behind, it's really what it's all about, is just rooting for that character to do stuff and you like that character. But if you don't like the main character, then you're not gonna like the story really. You can read it to the end, but you're not gonna be like, you know, this was a great story. Which like a lot of people loved Harry Potter because he was a character who had been through a lot of dark stuff, but he never really was dark himself. He was always upbeat and he was always, you know, like, I guess humorous. Ron was kind of like his humorous sidekick, but he was always brave and courageous, and he was always these things that people wanted to be. They wanted to be the person that faced their fears and did all these things and kind of were able to get out of these, start off so dark in life and then come into what they were. So that's why a lot of people loved Harry Potter, whereas not a ton of people, unless you were a 14-year-old girl, loved Twilight, because Twilight was about a girl who realistically had no personality, you know what I mean? It was kind of like...
Not as relatable.
I mean, you could relate it if you were a woman or if you were a girl, I guess, like at a time, and I'm sure there was a lot of men who read... I read Twilight. I read Twilight because my mom made me watch the movies, so I read them because I'm like, you know what, I'll just read them so I know what's going on, and I got through the whole series, and I'm like... So these were awful. I don't know. I just read them so I could get to the end of them, which sounds. I had a lot of time. I had a lot of time on my hand in high school that I read those, like at the very beginning of high school. So yeah. I mean, that's kind of like a. That's why not a lot of people like Twilight, because then Stephen King said it. You know, he's like, Harry Potter's a character about facing your fears and finding friendships, and it's about like overcoming obstacles. Whereas like Twilight and the main character, almost the message was how important it was to have a boyfriend. And that's kind of like what he said, and that made sense, you know, like it's just all about the tone and the theme behind, you know, the thing that you're trying to get across. Whatever you're trying to get across, you know, if you're trying to write a character that's like that, then you did a very good job, I guess, but not everybody likes to read stories or watch movies where the character is kind of boring. Yeah.
And so when you get actors in movies, there are people that are able to, like, I feel like a lot of them are just people that act and they're able to be who they are normally, like to a sense. Like obviously it's like it's almost an over-exaggerated version of themselves, but not to the point where it's unnatural. And I feel like it would be, another really fun idea would be if you took some sort of TV show and when you go through the hiring process of getting all the actors and actresses, instead of going for someone that's really good at acting, if you intentionally get the worst actors and put them all together in a show just to see how it all comes out.
Just to see how
it
like, comes out.
Almost like make a comedy out of it. Like, what do you think? Just really bad actors.
Well, and no, it's funny because there was that video on America's Got Talent of the guy singing Tequila. Did you ever see that? No. You know the song Tequila where it's just tequila, and it's like dun, 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 and it's just that's all they say in the whole song.
No.
So there's a song where all they say is tequila, and this guy made this video that went viral of him just sitting in a bar doing karaoke, and he'd wait for it, and then he would just kind of awkwardly say tequila. He went on America's Got Talent and just did that. He was just sitting there, and everybody was like looking around, they're like, what is this guy doing? And then he just kind of looked around, he was super awkward, like a little dirty mustache, and he just goes, tequila, and then just kind of like looks around and smiles, and everybody starts dying.
Was there like a soundtrack or just?
It was a karaoke machine. It was just karaoke. It was a karaoke machine, and there was a little timer that timed down to when tequila hit. And he was just sitting there, and he was just looking around, and he knew exactly when it was gonna hit. And then it would go stop, and then he'd go tequila, and then he did it like 3 different times, and he got like 4 like yeses, and everybody thought it was the funniest thing, but it was like the driest, stupidest humor ever. But it was just funny because it was just like it was so stupid that it was funny. So yeah, I think that would go along the lines of that super dry humor that can only really resonate with certain people, but it's still funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you a big fan of America's Got Talent?
I don't really watch it religiously. I'll watch it if there's like a breakout performance. Like his was on Twitter. There was a kid who was on there who was blind and I believe autistic, and he like had a phenomenal voice. So he was on there, and I watched his video. And there was another kid who was bullied. It was an African American kid who was bullied, and he played the violin. And he got bullied for, I think, playing the violin. I don't know what he got bullied for. Yeah,
Nerd.
Yeah, nerd. Oh, you know how to play a musical instrument. Like, fuck you. Like, yeah, I mean, it's just stupid. So he played it on the stage, and he was, great, and he was really good at it. So I watched some of those, like, things, and my girlfriend watches. She watches America's Got Talent to a point, and then she gets bored, and then she doesn't watch it anymore. But I'll watch some of the stuff. I don't really necessarily. There's some talents, like dancing talents, I think are really cool, and there's some singers that are really cool. But I never really got into the talent show sort of things. I watched The Voice a little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't really keep up with American Idol. I kept up with one guy's performance from American Idol because he was really good and I liked him. But I don't really watch shows like that. I get bored with them very, very easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With me, I feel like the one thing that kind of is a big turn off for me is kind of what we were just talking about, how they get the audience reaction. They're like, "Oh wow!" And it's like the most fake thing you'll ever see. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And then they'll have like the judges. The judges are also fake. And the worst co-host, I hated this co-host the most out of all of them, was Rihanna. Was it Rihanna? Or
what's on America's Got Talent?
yeah, she's like the model, right?
Rihanna sings. She's a singer.
No, not Rihanna. Sorry.
Tyra Banks.
Tyra Banks.
That's her.
Yeah. Just her reaction, just
oh yeah.
it angered me on the inside.
Yeah.
I think the definitely prime time when it comes to like talent shows was when American Idol first started, when they had Simon and Randy Jackson.
Oh yeah, that was American Idol's prime. And
that's because like it was
J-Lo,
sincere. There's like